Welcome to the Futurist Society podcast, where we delve into the latest advancements in technology, science, and culture. From discussions on the latest breakthroughs in AI, biotechnology, and space exploration, the Futurist Society is your window into all of the awesomeness that the future holds. Get ready to be informed and inspired as we consider the positive impact of emerging technologies on humanity. Without further ado, welcome your host, Dr. Awesome.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Futurist Society, where we are broadcasting from the present, but talking about the future. I'm Dr. Awesome, as always, and today we have Steve Dineen, who is a leader in the software and education and learning space. This is of particular interest to me because I think that in the future, we're going to be learning differently, specifically through the use of software. So, Steve, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing, and then we're going to get into it and talk about how things are changing.
Yeah, so Steve Dineen, I've been involved in education, both kid and adult education for most of my career. We run a corporate learning technology company. So we've been at the forefront of that for both in this company and my previous one, so a company called Fuse Universal. At the same time, we also have a YouTube channel, which we give for free. We have around 750,000 subscribers, about 10 million kids a year going through our bite-sized animated videos, learning maths and science. So a passion in all levels of education.
So one of the things that is the low-hanging fruit, I think, with learning is AI, right? I mean, I think that, as we learn more about how AI can affect learning, I think that it's going to be integral into the whole learning experience. But you're on the cutting edge. Like, what are you seeing when it comes to the results when AI is introduced into the learning programs?
Yeah, so I think again, AI is pretty broad, right? So we've been involved in it for a number of years, but I think obviously in the last 6 months, especially specifically because of ChatGPT coming to the marketplace, it's opened up a new accelerated range of opportunities. No doubt that we've seen not just that particular technology in generative AI, but I think it's become we've seen that all the other competitors now rush their products to the marketplace. So when we look at it, we probably look at 5 or 6 different buckets of areas around where AI can help. So from one big area is actually around AI for translation, localization. So trying to remove language as a barrier to learn. So how can anybody learn from anyone, irrespective of language? So, up until now, there's been some pretty good use of AI to allow us to go from voice to text and text to text translation. So the fact that, last year, we were able to, on our YouTube channel, to go from a pure English language into subtitles in Ukrainian, but then also using AI to go voice into Ukrainian. So that was pretty good, but we still had to, maybe because the quality wasn't quite there on the accuracy of both transcription and translation, we still had to maybe do some manual intervention for it. I think what we're seeing now this year, and literally this week and this month, is the level of transcription and translation be such a level of quality, so literally close to 99.9% on most of the content we're doing. We actually went live this year straight from English actually to Hindi, straight our first 30, 40 videos this week. So I think that's one bucket area where the use of AI to remove language is tremendously exciting and something we're right in the heart of it right now. And also, doing the same thing with our corporate clients. I think the second bucket is around productivity. So, as we've been using Google.com for a long time, how do we find an answer to a question? How do we accurately trust that's the best answer? When I grew up, the best answer we had was my brother, which we kind of figured out that he wasn't as accurate as we thought he had, but it was the best we had. At some point, we realized that Google, with their advent of technology and AI, was able to find answers from the world in a smarter way. So that was something we've started to introduce into our product. Google's own AI into the product to allow the same type side. But obviously now with generative AI, it takes that a step further. So with what Google has and what we had, which is what we call extracted answers of AI, that's where it's finding the best answer that already exists. And that's pretty cool. It's what we use. Obviously, ChatGPT and other things like Bard have introduced this next concept, which is all open technology for companies like us to plug into. That allows us to generate answers where the answer may exist from multiple places. So the best answer may be, not just in one video, one document, but it's combining those 2-3 things together and then synthesizing it into an easy way to understand. So for us, that's something we're now, putting into our technology. And the end benefit to that is, your end user, end person is able to get that answer, be more productive, to do their job in a faster, more efficient type way, which is totally exciting, which then leads you on to probably what comes after that. And we're starting to see the first versions of this, but the same type of technology used as an AI tutor, AI coach. So I think what we probably got today is the alpha versions, beta versions, and some version ones of that type side. You can see how that's going to be huge in all across aspects towards it. A 24/7 tutor coach that's trained on the best knowledge, the best answers, the best information, and talking to you either in text or a human-like voice or an avatar of your choice. Again, using, without ranting on, is interesting again now seeing the use of AI video, the ability to create your own avatar. So again, there's some great technology out there now where I can either create an AI version myself, but there's ethical issues, around that. But is now literally the ability to say, I want to create, me 20 years ago, but as a girl in India and so forth towards it. And the AI literally, I'm typing in text and it's changing my persona, my avatar as a live video that I then may want to say, what's the perfect coach for that individual? And I think that's becomes really interesting, right? So what's the right voice? What's the right video that connects with the student, that makes them feel trust and makes them interact in a way that's more engaging, helps them with the problem when they're stuck. So yeah, there's a bit of a long introduction, right? And that's just touching a few of the areas, right, that I guess we're currently thinking about and working on.
Yeah, some of the things that you talked about, I think are low-hanging fruit and then star shots, right? So the low-hanging fruit, I think, is the translation, which you're already doing. And I always tell people that I'm talking to that I feel like we're on the cusp of universal translation, and those universal translators. I think that we're on the cusp of that because, language in general is just an algorithm for communication, and it's only a certain amount of time before AI figures that out. But are you seeing rapid adoption once you translate something? Because, there's different cultural nuances. There's different, subtle intricacies that you can't really tell unless you've lived and grown up in that culture. And when you have a learning video, you translate it. Is it just like automatically mass adoption, or does it take like a little bit of time?
Well, I think the first thing is say why is it interesting, right? And we did some surveys years ago where we took some of our content and we gave it to kids in India. We gave it to kids in teaching maths, but with an English accent. We had it then with a local Bombay accent, local Mumbai accent, teach, but still in English, and then we had it in Hindi. In the first version, people didn't understand what the person was saying, so they didn't understand the English and they didn't understand the maths. In the second version, they understood the English for the person that had the local accent, but they still didn't understand the maths. And in Hindi, they understood the maths. So when you start looking at that, you recognize how important mother tongue audio is. To be able to process, and your brain isn't having to do a translation itself and is working less on the language and it's more working full capacity on the problem. So for us, I think absolutely, I think the jump from simply doing subtitles to audio AI in a way that's pressing a button, even if we're getting to, at 99.8% accuracy, right, is good enough for the types of, the 99% of the content that are out there. So yeah, I think what you do see is an increase in engagement, an increase in adoption, but also an increase in the understanding and that confidence that the student, the learner is going to gain from it. Yeah,
I think that language is so important. I think that that's how we originally learned before there was civilization. That's we were talking to each other. And that's one of the things that I think that AI is going to be a great tutor for, because when my daughter, who's 2 years old, speaks to, Google, that's a communication, like she can do complicated things, if she wants to put on her favorite video. For you and I, we have to take the remote out, we have to press YouTube, we have to search for it, whereas she just presses a button and says, okay, Google, play Don't Worry, Be Happy. And all of a sudden, the music video comes on, So I think that the learning capabilities are available at a younger age through language, and B, it's somehow ingrained in us as human beings. So I look forward to that day where all of our learning can be through conversation. And that's one of the things that I think that AI has the ability to really be effective at, is that when my kid has a robot that's teaching her math, not only could she see it visually, but she can have a conversation with that thing. It's like your own personalized tutor, just like you were saying. How far away are we from that?
No, I think we're there. I mean, I think we're there, and we have started to see the first type of versions of that, come through. They're raw, right? They're raw, but that's more about, I think, the investment in the technology, or investment of the companies doing it, and us all trying to get a head around what does the experience look like. I don't think the technology is the barrier anymore towards that. I mean, it's hitting to your point again. If you look at large language models, and what's kind of insane is I can now upload a manual in English or in preferred language, not have to translate it, but because that data is now put into zeros and ones in mathematical calculations, it's not stored in raw data. I'm able to ask a question of that manual in any language, because my language is being translated into numbers. The numbers ask the numbers in the vector database, that comes back. So that's pretty amazing right now when you're thinking the collective intelligence of the world, of a company, or of a channel, and our ability to interact with that, and therefore your coach, the ability to have that AI tutor coach. All those technologies are pretty much there, right? For us even to actually choose the accent we want, the voice we want, which is, this week we released our first videos onto our YouTube channel, actually using AI voice for the first time as the English American version. Because when you play it, it's the nuances and the inflections, you just wouldn't know. It's just great. And if we want to change the audio, we type a little bit out, and it recodes the whole thing. So I think the audio piece, I think now we're seeing the video pieces come through as well. So that ability now to train. And the only one thing I'd say is that it's obviously easier to do it on areas that don't change too often. So math, science, and so forth for kids is easier than, let's say, a car manufacturer whose products are changing every week.
Right.
There's still some maybe nuances and stuff to that work out, but it's happening so fast, right? I think by the end of this year, we'll see much more industry ready. I think AI tutoring, AI coaching parts where we are interacting with an expert who's trained on the company's expertise. So what would their best salesperson say? And that's an AI avatar of their best people. Obviously, ethically, you've got to make sure that everyone's comfortable to share their knowledge and to share that part. And there's obviously some fear and stuff around that as well.
Yeah, I think that's going to be an exciting future, especially for, our kids' generation. I think that when I look at learning, I look at it as, like a fertilizer for a plant, right? If you give it at the right times and at the right concentrations, you can have a plant really blossom, and that changes for different plants, right? So one plant might require less fertilizer than another, and I think it's the same with kids. And I think that we are just on the verge of learning different people's different skill levels when it comes to learning. And so once we are able to figure that out, I think that's going to be really interesting. And for example, like if you have a kid that's watching one of your videos and he blazes through it, and then he goes to the next one, he goes to the next one, he goes to the next one, that kid might have different opportunities available to him through the AI versus somebody that really needs to focus on one. Is that something that you guys are seeing, like when you're tracking users? Like, do you have any real world data to match up just the user, like how much they're actually using the product?
Yeah. So and again, one thing that, for example, we go to our corporate side, one thing we do know, right, and actually to be fair is even for the kids too, that we know that frequency of access is the biggest factor towards predicting a performance outcome. So it's not necessarily the amount of consumption. So when we looked at our data and across a number of big brands and said, what's the most important thing? Is it the fact that they've gone through all these courses, or they've consumed so many hours, or is it the frequency? And actually what we see is especially on the corporate side, there is a frequency that people who frequently go back to the platform and interact with it to say, how do I get access to a quality answer? How do I refresh myself on the best practice of a person that explains this concept I need to apply right now? Those people perform significantly better and get upskilled and reskilled 300% faster than the people that are probably asking somebody next to them, or guessing, or are still maybe not necessarily adopting, becoming digitally, accepting that a digital coach is something that's always there to help them. I think our kids are born in that, right? So to your point, I thought, and this is the age your daughter's at, right? I thought when my kids were at that age, there was a part where I'm thinking, okay, I don't have to worry about lockdown. They don't have to type yet. They don't know how to, so I'm safe. And then they were like talking to Google and to YouTube, asking them questions. Oh, wow. So to your point there, I think our interactions and how we communicate is radically different. I think we know that my kids have learned more from school, more from YouTube than they probably have from school in terms of real knowledge, not to say social bits, but the pure knowledge bits. And we know, and the same thing, even for the kids that are using for your school, the teachers say, we can see again, frequency of access is a big thing. So the big part, the question therefore is, how do you create that experience so it's engaging, so it's personalized, that the person wants to engage it and it's a natural place to go to, rather than our brains tend to be lazy, right? Our brains are lazy. So we'll always go to the way we think is easiest. If that's my brother, who happens to be us, or, if that is a voice search, which is about the same length of time, but I trust it to be more accurate, my brain will always go to that place where I believe I'm going to get the best answer in the shortest period of time.
So I like what you said about the fact that YouTube has provided your kids with more learning than you think that than their actual schooling system, because you hear so many bad things about screen time. And listen, like I wish that I was good enough of a parent to say no screen time, but I'm just not. Like, it's nice to park her in front of the TV, let her watch some YouTube, and hopefully it's educational. But I've just realized, like, she is leaps and bounds, has more general knowledge than kids who are not exposed to that stuff. So, you're in the industry. How do you feel about that? What do you think the research shows? Personally, it's something that I think is like a necessary evil, but I want to know your opinion.
I think it's a great question, and my wife and I often debate the point, despite the fact we have a immensely successful YouTube channel between us. And the best thing I can say there is that, look, YouTube it has two big parts, right? It works obviously with content creators to create great content. And, we have a channel manager who manages us, and she manages 100 other education channels. And the second part to that of the content creators is the algorithm. And the algorithm has, they say, like 8 million signals or variables it's looking at to say whether it should recommend this content in front of you or our child. So the best advice I always give is screw up the algorithm for our kids, right? Put a few we're not watching, put a few more educational videos inside there, and they'll watch them, right? They do. It's like they'll watch anything that's on the screen, and when it starts auto-playing the next video, I see them watching some stuff about the world and the universe. And I was having questions when they're 8 or 9 years, because they wanted to build their own game. And they said, Dad, we might have a problem. It's 8 years old. You might have a problem. I said, what's your problem? And he goes, I think we've got a copyright issue. What do you mean? You're 8 years old. How do you know about copyright? So I was like, but in my head, I'm saying, oh, okay, so what's the copyright issue? Well, we want to build our game, Alter of Elements, but we saw this other game which we were inspired by it. And because we're inspired by it, we think we might have a copyright issue. The guy gets copyright, right? So yeah. I think the part is, I'd wish YouTube allowed us to allow our kids at an early age to watch it, but at the same time have a better filtering mechanism that we can filter out, certain variables and certain signals that we don't want to have inside it. So we could weight it towards there. But they do have a phenomenally, amazing algorithm, and I think it's getting smarter and smarter. And it's interesting now, with YouTube, that I do believe now that probably more people are accessing content from the homepage than via search. And you go back 5 years ago, search would have been the #1 way, either by Google or YouTube, to get YouTube video. Now I think they're nailing that signaling piece to understand what's the weighting, the boosting, to be able to actually keep us coming back and making it hyper-personalized for ourselves.
Yeah. The American Academy of Pediatrics says that, for most ages, 20 minutes of screen time is the max. Personally, I'm not hitting that. Like, I'm like grossly overhitting that, just because that's the type of parent I am. And like, I love my kid and stuff, but I don't think it's as bad as people are thinking. Like, I did a deep dive into it a while ago, and I think that the evidence is a little weak. I think a lot of it is anecdotal. Certainly social media and many of these other programs that are available to us on screens have really well documented negative aspects, but educational videos, I'm just not seeing the the data match up with what people are scared of? And I wondered your opinion on that.
Yeah, and I think to the point, right? I mean, if you look at the comments on our YouTube channel, right, it's insane. And I know I'm emphasizing our YouTube channel rather than a corporate part, but it's a bit where I guess I can interact and I can practice the most. But the most common comment is, I now understand this concept in 5 minutes. My teacher's been trying to explain to me for the last 2 years. Right. So, let's not forget how most classrooms are massively limited in their ability to convey knowledge in an effective way. The great educational, content on YouTube is taken time to craft it, because we're all competing for attention against each other. So I'm not sure that I agree with, I think, the negativity around YouTube, when it has, obviously, it is the #1 learning platform in the world. I think they say 86% of people are learning on YouTube, and there are, an amazing set of content creators that are creating really high quality educational content. Even YouTube paid people like us to actually create. So we're creating a range of videos now on climate change in partnership with YouTube, because they're saying, look, we love your style of content. So can you actually, and we want to make more content in areas we care about. So let's create great free educational content in those areas. And then maybe slightly back to your AI bit, AI is allowing us to make that smarter, better, faster, because there's so much content you want to create. And also you need to make sure your content is how do you get the right title, the right description, the right thumbnail? And again, all the AI helps us with that, right? So we now take our transcript for our video, we put it into a LLM and say to it, give us the best title. And it comes out 9 out of 10 times, probably slightly better than we would have when we spent an hour thinking about it.
What is it, LLM? I'm sorry?
Sorry, so a large language model. So all of the generative AI technologies like ChatGPT and Bard and Google Bard, they're all based upon this large language models. So it works in a smarter way than the rest of them, right?
Yeah,
so
immediately recognize the acronym.
No. But the ability to create titles, thumbnails, descriptions, even scripts, right? To be able to take our scripts and say, how do you make this script slightly more engaging, slightly deeper, and this is where I think back to the personalization stuff I love, because I sit down with my kids now who are 10, 11, and we watch the videos, but we're also using ChatGPT or Bard to help us with questions, right? So we're saying, actually, maybe on this video you didn't quite get it right. You didn't, it didn't nail it. So we asked for an explanation as a 10-year-old, using superheroes as the metaphor to help understand it. So what I love is this now ability to personalize the learning experience completely to the individual in front of us. Now give me 5 questions in that superhero type analogy, and let me know if I've got stuff going wrong. So starting to put these things together is one of the big things that so how do we put our AI coach with our videos with that level of personalization that's exactly relevant to the level of the child or the level of the adult, but also in context of, well, that's interesting to them as well.
Yeah. I think certainly the older model of just like a lesson plan and a textbook and a teacher lecturing from in front of you, it's going to go the way of the dinosaurs. One of the quotes that I always say to people is that the Stone Age didn't end because we ran out of stones, right? That there's going to be lots of those people that are available, but I just think that this is a better, more effective way of doing it. In the same way that, again, with the plants analogy, we have grown from using manure as fertilizers. Now we have like really hyper effective fertilizers, right? And I think that that's going to be the same way. I wonder if there is anything that you can see in the metrics that you're evaluating, of any trends that would be interesting from a future perspective that gives you hope for the future. Are you seeing, obviously more engagement is great because you have kids that are more engaged in learning, and that's always something that gives you optimism. But what are some metrics that you see on the back end that are really exciting to you?
Well, I mean, I do want to, I think, double down that first one, right? Because it goes back to how much screen time, right? So is it an hour or 2 hour screen time? And I think it's what the data does tell us, right? Is the more that we can create these digital habits. So, when I think upon learning today, right, I think upon, there's probably 3 main learning interaction moments, right? So one is I've got a structured experience, because I want to pass an exam, or I'm onboarding a company, and the ability to personalize and prescribe that is great, is now becoming much easier to hyper personalize that experience. I think the second one we talked to, which is around curiosity, right? So how do I create an environment where it's understanding me like YouTube homepages, and it's surfacing content that's interesting educational content in tune with what I find interesting, how I want to learn, that's going to surface that type of stuff. And then the third is through search. So the ability to, search used to be, I want to search and find the book or the course. Then it came about a more YouTube style like that. I want to find the video. And those two things are still relevant. Now, obviously, then we added Google Answers about 5 years ago, which is, I want to be able to find the best paragraph or the best answer from a given text. And now we're into generative answers, which is the answer may not exist, and it's going to try and create the answer for me or synthesize a bunch of answers together. But I think, again, it goes back to the point of saying, what's the most important data point that we see? And the most data point isn't this, I need to sit in a classroom for 8 hours, and it's maybe not that I should be sitting at a PC and consuming 2 hours of YouTube content, but it does mean that our habits of learning, of frequency of access, that I might be going 5-10 minutes a day to consume some content. I'm searching and finding my capability to go do that. And I think it's really now transferring what's becoming consumer habits and moving those into our kind of adult habits. And as companies like us, what we're now doing is building technologies and surfacing and integrating these different types of concepts. So integrating your ability to search as an answer like Google, the ability to find your content on video, like YouTube, the ability to automatically hyper-personalize your experience between it. But data-wise, yeah, I mean, undoubtedly the thing that drives us is actually quite similar to YouTube, right? So we have what we call our engagement funnel. YouTube has an engagement funnel. And so engagement funnel, and it is kind of similar to marketing, right? How do I get you to that in the first place? How am I analyzing data to say, why is this group of individuals, this division, this role, dropping off at this level? And how do I get people to the ultimate goal, which is returning users? What we do know ultimately is returning users are higher performers, both at school and at work. And therefore, how do we use our data to understand how, and we have a thing that we call the 12 levers of engagement. So the 12 things that we think really impacts engagement. Those are things like site design, the content strategy, how you're in a work environment, your line manager or your leaders, involvement inside of it. So there's a lot of data there to work out, but the end goal for us is that returning users. And then beyond that, then you've got a whole bunch of different parameters to look at to say when it's working, why is it working, when it's not, what do we think, because we're seeing this dropout between active and engaged users. So active meaning I've gone to the platform, but I haven't engaged, or engaged and I haven't come back. What's all the different things the different levers that we can maybe retry that's going to allow us to actually increase that number of returning users?
Yeah. One of the things we did not highlight, which I just want to change gears for, is augmented reality, because especially with Apple coming out with this new product, I think that's going to be huge. I've been such a big fan of augmented reality because I think it's, when I think about, again, how we learn, how we interact, we're such a visual species. How are you, because I know that's one of the spaces that you're in, how are you seeing that helps, and what are you hoping will come from this whole new augmented reality push?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been big fans of it for a long time, both AR and VR. But obviously the challenge has been scale, and I think that's still the issue. You do look at, I've got every headset there is, right? And you see the potential of it. I mean, the amazing potential of it, right? To not just learn about the moon landing, but to be part of the experience, not to just to hear about dinosaurs, but to be walking with dinosaurs, right? So the potential of it is amazing, but you still got to get right, 2 or 3 aspects, right? You've got to make the accessibility piece a big piece. You've got to make sure the content can be created in a way that's affordable. And you've got to make sure the devices are affordable. So I think it's brilliant that Apple has come into the marketplace, right? Because no one's going to market it like those guys, right? So every single Apple shop, you'll be able to walk in there, you'll be able to try it out. The whole marketing retail engine towards that. So I think it's this first serious step towards mass adoption, not at probably a £2,500-3,000 kind of or dollar kind of price range, right? But that's going to attract the early adopters. People like you and I are going to be, well, how can I not have one, right? And as soon as it came out, my kids are like, obviously, Daddy's going to have one of them, right? So. But I think it's the birth of a new era. I think it's the birth of it. And I think the fact they're taking it in the direction of as they call it, spatial computing, I think is really interesting, right? Rather than as a pure entertainment device. So, so it does seem like a reboot. I think what Apple feels like is a reboot, which I think then we'll start to see. But what you do, in order to be master, you do need it to become mobile phone-like, right? You need it to be as accessible as a mobile phone. Sure, some people have £1,000 mobile phones, but you can also get a Chinese smartphone for £20. We put those we were able to buy those and put those into schools years ago. So I don't think it becomes mass, right, until we get to that. But I think the fact that Apple's now in the marketplace, I think is tremendously exciting for all of us.
Yeah, I like the fact that Apple has taken this on, because just like everything else, their ideas are going to become the industry standard. For example, just the whole haptic technology or not really haptic technology, but the gesture technology, like everybody's going to use that now. So that now that's a standard. So like when you use an Oculus, when you use an Apple product, it's going to be the same. And that I think is also going to help adoption, right? Because now every single kid is going to know that this, changes something, or this changes something. So I think that that's going to be exciting to see. I know that you said you're going to get one. I'm obviously going to get one myself. Like what are you looking at? Because I'm sure you've seen the
Sure.
post for it. Like what specifically with regards to learning excites you about that?
Well, I mean, it was like, but I guess to be fair, when you said, what's the thing that, when my kids first said to me, Daddy, we know why you want one, because you can block out us, right? You can block out the sound, so you can, and I said, actually, there's not the number one reason. Number one reason, right, is actually to create memories, right?
Yeah.
Is to create, I mean, that is insane, right? Not just for family, but for work and education.
Yeah.
To be able to relive experiences. I mean, I'm lucky enough with my kids that every now and then my kids say to me, Dad, let's go watch our baby pictures, our baby videos, right? And we sometimes we'll lie in bed a half an hour and we'll have a laugh and joke about the things we did, but to relive those experiences. I mean, you're now in a position with your kids, you're young enough, you're going to be able to create experiences you can relive. I mean, video's nice and a picture was good, a video's better, but reliving it through that headset to turn on, that's the insane part. And again, from an educational side, that's insane. The ability, as I mentioned earlier on, to reduce the cost of creating content. Yeah. That was what allowed us to make our Fuse School channel and our corporate business successful, right? One of the big things that we were able to crack was how do you industrialize the digitization of tacit knowledge? How do you get the knowledge out of people's heads and make it available so that people go, I get it really easily? And that's the big success we've had up with Fuse School. And also what we teach our corporate clients to do. But it's still, it was solving the problem that normally you go through a Hollywood production cycle to make content, right? And there was that cost that means it's not industrialized, that you can't make it at scale. So I think with the vision of the Apple headset, I think the ability to have an experience where you're saying, well, actually, how do you climb up a pole? How do you do the physical activities? What does the sales experience look like, right? A presentation environment that you've got to do for your first time when you're terrified of it, and actually record that, put you in a room, play it back and coach towards it. It just opens up, I think, the cost of content piece for 3D, I think, and for virtual worlds, I think just opens up a whole new range of, coaching, performance, learning, and content creation.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what I thought was a really smart thing that they did is they have the outward facing eyes so that you can still interact with the environment. Cause that's the thing that I feel like is the big detractor to virtual reality, just like what you were saying. Like you turn it on and you block everything out. But I would hope that whatever technology that we have does have some sort of social component to it, because that's going to be, more isolating and really give in to the fears that people have about this technology. When you have the eyes facing out, I think that it still has the ability to include you in, just like the memory that you were saying, like if it's somebody's birthday party, like you're still there, right? I mean, right now it looks horrendous. It still looks like you're like half robot when you're in that situation. But the technology is going to change, and I'm sure it's going to get smaller, and still having those same abilities will be cool like 10 years from now when we can just be wearing some glasses, record that memory, and we can still be in the memory itself and not be excluded from it, but then enjoy it later. I think that's going to be really exciting. But listen, we're getting to the end of our time, and at the end of our time, I always ask 3 questions to my guests of things that I was thinking about while we're talking. And so I just would like for you to indulge me, because there's so many different things that we talked about that I would really love your insight on, and just to get to know you a little bit better. What I ask a lot of my guests, especially people in the technology space, is that so many of us have science fiction as one of their inspiring reasons for entering into this field. Do you have that? Do you have that inspiration, just to get the process rolling? Like, I look at, Star Trek as optimal, like that's the utopia that I want to live in. And then, with the virtual reality, Minority Report is something that's really interesting. I hope that I can have a robot that helps me, similar to Isaac Asimov's dreams. But what inspires you? What got you into this field?
I think there's always the Captain Kirk, right? I think Captain Kirk inspires us all to go do things which other people never done before, to go to places and to discover things, right? So I think that's within inside all of us as one part. I think more recently, right? And to our AR VR part, Ready Player One, I thought was just I watched it 3 times, inside the movie, and it was obviously amazing, both to bring back to childhood, but also showing that near term. I mean, most of those concepts they had there, whether that's right, my kids playing Roblox, but in a VR type world towards it, it was like you could touch it, that it's so close to us. Now, it is a shame, I think, where it doesn't look like, Facebook's metaverse has quite got to where it was trying to do with it. It was a brave part towards it. Maybe it will reboot it and re-get it there, or maybe Apple is going to get it right. But I think they painted that world beautifully, right? But at the same time, trying to balance with the world, is to your point, right? How do you make sure you don't cut yourself off from society and you're part of it, and it's just something you jump into? For me, I use that technology, the VR stuff. My brother has a VR headset. He lives like 200 miles away from me. So my kids and his kids will often on a Sunday go in and actually play a game together, and it feels like I'm talking to him next to him. So, I think where it's a little step towards that Ready Player One type stuff, but I think more of that is cool.
Yeah, I look forward to that, where, these borders and, distances are kind of done away with the interactions that we could have. I think that's a really great future to be inspired by. Cool. So the other thing that I think of when I'm talking about this stuff, especially software developments, is that we're on a logarithmic scale, right? I mean, who knew 10 years ago that I would be talking to you like this on Zoom, and it's a really natural and interesting interaction. What do you hope, like, what's like the low-hanging fruit that you specifically, Steve Dineen, wants out of this logarithmic scale? Like, where do you hope that society goes towards, so that we can, like, for me personally, like, I can't wait until we have like life extension, right? Like, I want to see all of these different things. Like, I specifically in the software field, what is something that, like, you really hope that happens, but we just haven't?
I think it's still, my goal and drive is the same as today is back then, and I wouldn't mind some of that as well, what you're talking to. But my goal has always been democratization, the equality of education, right? So that's the bit I think that I'm most excited by, right? When you make a jump towards that, and I think, when we started our journey on this 10 years ago, and we created something that 10 million kids are using and millions of adults are using in our corporate business, at the heart of that was, how do you use technology to equalize and to allow, in a corporate, everyone's able to learn, not just the top 10%. In our Few School channel, it was, how do you give the kids in developing countries that go no power, no electricity, access the same type of education that the kids in the posh school want to get to. And to be fair, this year we saw that kind of happen, right? Because our stuff has been used in developing countries for a while, but now we're starting to see the top schools actually use our content in the classrooms. If I then go the next step forward, right, and this is where I think generative AI is massively interesting to work, because it's accessible by all. I love VR, right, and I love AR, but it's not quite as accessible to all. But anybody that can get access to a mobile phone is accessing generative AI, able to access a ChatGPT or a Bard, and the acceleration of all them. And I think as companies like us figure out, how do you now start to merge and morph these technologies together into a new hyper-personalized experience towards it, what we're able to do is we've got a new set of tools that allows us to accelerate faster towards that equalization. And I think that's what this year we're looking at going, that's just hugely exciting.
Yeah, the the log jam of content creation will be done away with because humans won't be in charge of it. AI will be in charge of it. And then you could, make tons of videos. Then it would just democratize everything further. That's an interesting future for sure.
Well, and it's the personalization more that I learn, right? So I still think the videos you'll have a high degree of creativity, human intervention to be able to create great content, right? I think what we see is the creators will create better content in partnership with AI. But I think that the learning experience of the learner will be much more heavily influenced by AI. The ability to learn in my best way, to learn in my best moment, wherever I am, to your bit, that, I don't necessarily even have to ask the question, but it knows, it's predicting what I need to know in advance of that, which we're already kind of almost there already, right? So we're already in our technology able to predict most of what you need to learn at a click of a button based upon who you are, what you're doing, where you are, what screen you're on. All those things go into an algorithm to say, I think this is the bit of content that actually is most relevant to you. That's only going to get smarter, right? So I think that hyper personalization, contextual learning piece using technology for it is tremendously exciting.
Yeah, that's cool. So last question. I feel like there's a lot of negatives of society that are going to go away in the future, right? Like in the same way that I think that 100 years from now, we're going to look at the fact like, oh my God, we used to keep dolphins and orcas in like cages and we used to just make them jump for us. Like that's a terrible way to live, and we're going to look back at that and be like, thank God we stopped doing that. What is something that you think that in the next, I don't know, 100 years, we're going to look back and be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we used to do that. Thank God that went away.
In terms of in our space of technology, you mean?
Yeah.
I think it probably goes to that structured formal learning piece, right? It goes back to, because it is crazy, right? I mean, how much learning is still the Victorian age? It's still based upon, we learned at school in the classroom. That's how we learn since Sumeria 5,000 years ago. And it's still what the majority of corporates are still doing. You're putting in a room and we're still talking at people. So I do think that we're now seeing an acceleration of companies like us be able to harness technology in a really cool way. That where people are looking backwards and go, well, why would I put somebody on a Zoom call for 5 hours, right? Or 40 hours in a room towards it? Why would I not? And I think again about my kids and my business, right? And this one size fits all approach to learning, it is madness, right? And you see it we're all different and all our kids are different. And to have one style for all of them, and you're trying to adopt to 20, 25 people, I think now the fact that the technology can understand the individual, understand where you are, understand the context, understand your language, all those things, and adopt to you to help you get to where you want to get to. I think that's what we look back even in, a year, 5 years, and we see ourselves, as little babies. And this year is just a huge acceleration, right? Because of the jump in AI that's become available.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that it's gonna really help those kids that are not thriving in this particular model, right? Like we're gonna look at, 40 years from now, oh my God, thank God I didn't have to go to school in a classroom, and I was able to learn through AI. Otherwise I would have been, so far behind. I think that really goes into your piece about the democratization of education.
Well, you figure, there's one kid may not have, let's say, English as a main language in the classroom, right? So they're at a disadvantage. Other kids may be neurodiverse, so being taught and that particular way, they've got a massive disadvantage towards it. So, fundamentally that classroom is set up for failure, for 30% of the classroom. So I think the only way you get through that is through individual personalization.
Yeah, that's cool. I look forward to that future with you, Steve. It's so nice to speak with you.
Likewise.
Thanks everybody for listening, and for the rest of our crowd and listeners, we will see you in the future. Have a great day.
Take care.
We appreciate you taking part in today's episode. Take this chance to reimagine a better future by joining a community of futurists who strive for a remarkable world. Be a part of this growing network and contribute to making the world a more positive place. Visit thefuturistsociety.net and subscribe to the show so you don't miss a drop of hopeful futurism.